All right, I think it's Friday somewhere in the world, so there's no better time. This is the time we talk about JORC, anticipated event. I've been looking forward to this. It's the first time we're doing this, so we're going to have to fly by the seat of our pants. I've got no idea where we're going to land, but appreciate everybody who's come online. So we've got viewers and listeners on YouTube and on LinkedIn, and I can still see there's some people drifting in. So thanks all for joining, really appreciate it. And I'm probably going to repeat a couple of sort of context setters a few times as people drift in late, because I do want to have a few ground rules for this conversation. So the first thing I want to just get off my mind is that this is not an official consultation event, right? So we're not here in our original JORC capacity. As some of you might know, I have an ex officio role on the JORC committee. And I know a lot of the people there, and I don't want to steal from their thunder in terms of all this great work that's been happening. But I thought to have a pretty sort of loose chat with people, and really when I say with people, I mean with people. So this is all about a conversation. This is not me talking to the screen. And for that reason, I don't really know where we're going to land. I've got no idea how this is going to go. It's a first. It's a LinkedIn Live event. We found out this morning that the LinkedIn servers must be hosted on Jupiter because it is an intense delay to LinkedIn. So if you're following us on LinkedIn at the moment live and things are a bit jittery, then jump over to YouTube because that quality is a lot higher, and you'll be able to get better quality out of this conversation. So again, I'll repeat some of these things for the late strollers. We've got a few house rules to set here, and I've got a whole bunch of paperwork in front of me. I do have a beer here as well because I want to set the tone right? This is not an official conversation. It's Friday in New Zealand here, 4 o'clock. So for us, that means beer o'clock. And I do want to make this a fun conversation. There is a beer can opening right there. I'm joined by Jason and Lauren, who are our producers today. So Jason is our standard producer for our Measured podcast that some of you registered to. And Lauren is our Chief Compliance Officer. She knows everything about JORC, but she said, Renee, you really have to take this one. I'd love to do this, but...
this one's on you.
Yeah, this one's on me. Okay, so I will be talking with them sometimes because I'm going to ask them to drag a whole bunch of things on the screen. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I don't know 5 minutes from now what we'll be talking about. So bear with me as I screw this up. This could all be professional suicide, or it could be awesome. We'll soon find out. But I'm going to rely on you. So a couple of things. We'll run a Slido poll. So some of you who've come to conferences a bit will know what this is about. So I'm not sure if it's showing on the screen, but we have a QR code that you can scan on your phone, or if you're watching this on your phone, then you can follow the link and you'll get to the Slido page. Go there because we're looking for interaction here. And if you're not familiar with this, the key benefit here is that if other people ask a question and you like that question, you can upvote it. And that allows me, or on our side, to get the best questions filtering to the top for me to go into. And we'll be running some polls as well, and they'll be a little bit provocative. So, I'm not trying to be politically correct here with some of these questions. I really try and invite you to be honest and open and maybe see a different angle to this entire JORC discussion. Right, so that's a couple of house rules first, and I'm just going to sneak to see how many people we got on to see if I need to keep repeating this, but I'll come back to this point for any latecomers. So we'll sprinkle some questions in there, and we could start with one, but I'm going to set a couple of more ground rules here before we do so. Now, this is, for some reason, JORC seems to be the perpetual, endless giving well of fun and joy. I mean, as a geologist, you could go to a discussion on rubidium-strontium ratios and you would get 5 people attending, but if it's JORC, then everybody's there, which I find really fascinating. So I wanted to start with a little bit of context about why I'm here. I don't want to be that JORC guy, so I don't know if my label is on here, but, I find JORC interesting. And I've got lots to say on it, as some of you will know, but the idea really for me was coming into this industry a bit left field. I was never a UWA graduate with a classic sort of mining pathway. I'm from Holland, as some of you know. I had no idea about the mining industry, and when I came into this and I started doing some work, at some point somebody said the word JORC report, and I was like, what is this strange thing you talk about? And then you start looking into what it is, and then they talk about competent persons, and it gets very strange from that point on. And so for me, it was really a journey of, okay, if I want to participate in this industry, then I want to be a competent person. So what does that then mean? And then you start looking into it, and I just got confused, as perhaps, so many of you have become. But I've also have an absolute respect for why we need what we need, or we need what we have. So I definitely want to dive into that a little bit further as well. But again, the context setting, this is not because I consider myself to be a JORC expert. I do a bit of work on it, and as a consultant, because I'm a resource geologist, as some of you know, so I need to know this stuff. But I don't know every letter of it. There are other people on the JORC committee who are far more learned in this, and I don't want to pretend that I'm the source of all knowledge here. This is a discussion. So when I don't know the answer to something, I'm going to say, sorry, not my field of expertise. And that's what you find on a JORC committee as well. There are different people with different backgrounds that have different bits of value. So I'm just here to have a discussion and see what's out there, and I enjoy these things, the debate, and I've got a bunch of LinkedIn comments that you've already blasted all over the internet to start us off with, and since you put your name to it, I can put these online here and call you out for your comments and have a nice discussion about it. And if those who made comments have actually tuned in, then you can certainly come online to defend that point. If you want to get on the call, so there's a couple of ways to interact with this podcast or with this interview or whatever you want to call it. You can post your comment in the LinkedIn box and we'll try and filter it out, but we don't really suggest you do that. If you have a question, then put it in the Slido poll. If you just have a comment, then we'll see if we can filter those out and communicate with people. If you're struggling to hear anything, we'll try and help you out. Maybe there's a connection issue. There's always people who have those issues. Can't help you with that. But if you want to come in and actually talk to us, then you have the ability to do so. We'll share a link. And Jason, maybe you can clarify where that link is sitting for us. But that means you can go in the waiting room and then we'll pull you in. And this is all software that I've never heard of before that deals with that. You'll come on a split screen. We can see you if you have a camera. If you don't want to be on camera, also fine. We'll hear your audio and I can have a conversation with you. I might pull in 2 or 3 people if you're around and if you want to talk to these subjects. I know there's some real heavyweights dialing in, or I hope, because they registered, and I'm certainly hoping that they're going to contribute to this conversation, not going to hide behind the keyboard. So if you want to come online and say something useful, go in the waiting room. Jason, you want to talk to that?
Yes, so this is Jason, the producer here. If you want to join us and have a chat with Renee and share your opinions, if you look for Lauren Tooley in the chat, she's our other producer. If you message her directly on LinkedIn, that would be the easiest way to do it. And she will send you the private link. Obviously, we don't want to have it necessarily public, but if you want to come have a chat, just DM her and she will send you the link to join us here on the stream.
Yeah, or can I also not just put a comment in the text box somewhere, and then we can send them a link there?
Absolutely. Yeah, if they wanted to join, if they comment on the LinkedIn post, we can see that, and then Lauren will be able to send you the link.
Yeah, excellent. All right, so we'll work that out. But for me, this is the fun bit. I mean, I'm gonna at one point run out of gas here on a Friday afternoon, so I can keep talking. But I'd love for you to do the talking as well here. That's the idea. So, what have I not covered yet? So, a couple of other things. Here, if we're getting into a debate the issue and not the person, please. I know some of this stuff gets quite heated. I've seen some pretty heated comments. Some of them I'm actually going to defend. I'm going to not try and pick a side in this discussion. I'm going to make some cases for and against. Some of it you might be surprised hearing my position on, but I think we want to really be courteous with each other and debate the issue and not the person. There are particularly some comments floating around on consultants filling their own pockets with all this money by creating this code for bureaucracy and so on. I'm a little bit sensitive to that, so I will bite back on that. But if you got good arguments, let's hear them, right? So that is also off the chest. What else do we have? I've got a whole bunch of paperwork in front of me. If I have to look up things, then I might have to take some time to do so. But I also want to give a shout out to the current consultation events that are going out to the industry. I think today is Melbourne actually, and I'm not sure who is presenting that on the JORC behalf, but last Monday we had the first official JORC event in Wellington, so there'll be more to come as well. So if you want to talk with the professionals, then that's the place to go. If you want to have a yarn here, then stay here and hang out with me for a couple of hours. And it's set for a couple of hours. If after an hour I look at the numbers and everybody's gone, then I'll probably, leave it and draw a line there. But if the discussion is good, we'll keep on going. Right, so with that said, let's see where we start. If there are any questions already, I'm happy to go straight there, but I have a few items that I could go there. So I'm just going to look sideways to see if we've got anybody who's been brave enough to put a question out there. If not, we can put our first question to you out there as well. All right, here we got a question, and it's got one up. Yep, so I'll take that one to the top. So Matt B said, if there was compliance to JORC 2012, a lot is what trying to be addressed in the update would not be an issue. Plans to reform the compliance, lack of complaints. Yeah, all right, to dive straight in, Matt B. Plans to reform the compliance, lack of complaints. I might go straight to my little PowerPoint with the bow tie, and I might come back to that later, but this is something that I presented to a private institution that wanted to adopt a version of JORC. So this is in my own personal consultation capacity, but I framed it like this. So let me try and answer your question there, Matt. If you look at the classic bow tie diagram of how potentially unwanted outcomes happen, you have this before and after bow tie structure. And I see JORC, or what lies around JORC, a little bit in the same, in a similar space. So, you have things like incompetence, fraudulence, and ignorance, and those are the things that would lead to a bad outcome. So we have some prevention in place. And those preventions are those black lines there that you see, the horizontal blocks, right? And that should then block. This is your classic safety thing as well, right? Where you get people not hurting themselves as well, if you like. So on the left, you've got your preventative before, your control barriers. And if you then go to the control barriers, the next slide, please, Lauren, then, the prevention stuff is coming up with the concept of a QP or a CP or whatever your jurisdiction is. Obviously today we're talking about competent persons, and I should not abbreviate this, but it obviously doesn't fit on the screen, so don't start shouting at me that CP is the incorrect abbreviation. But that is meant to stop the incompetence, right? That you're competent, and right now we're going to be introducing a CV of record, and I'm going to come back to all of that. Fraudulence, we have a code. A code is a preventative system, right? It tells you, it warns you to do something right so that things go correctly. And ignorance, we have education and training. We have a couple of JORC courses now. The AIG and the OSMM have some really good JORC courses, and all of that is intended to prevent, right? So there's your SOP, your classic QA analogy. But then I think what you're discussing there, Matt, or what you're asking is about what we do if something bad happens. And if we don't get our complaint system in order, then it is my argument, and some of you know my position on this, that nothing really will work. So yes, we are not positioned for success because we really don't have the mitigating safeguards that follow after a bad event. And if you just go to the next slide, Lauren, then, for instance, we have self-regulation. Yay, right? Are you competent enough? That's all we have. And as most of you know, and there's some comments from managing directors, and I know a few of you have dialed in as well. So, if you're familiar with the ASX pre-screening that started happening, I don't know, about 6, 8 years ago, at least there is some pre-screening, but not necessarily of the competence nature. It's all very, speeding ticket and compliance regulated. So, yeah, I agree with the question. If the intent was to point out that self-regulation is really not the way forward. And Lauren, maybe as a bit of a joke, if you can please pull out the little image here. Let's see which one it is. It is the self-regulation number 2. If you can just throw that on the screen. This is from a presentation that I did quite a while ago at a conference, I think, and I found this on the internet, and I obviously I know, Mark Murphy, if you're online, I think you found a new hobby into finding images and doctoring the text up, and so I know what you're doing. I see you. And I like it because I did the same thing with some of these things, and this is one of my favorites, right? I fundamentally can't get myself to understand how that could possibly work, right? And I can come up with a whole bunch of analogies. It could be driving or otherwise. So anyway, hopefully that, if you go back to the question that we had, if you don't mind, then I'm back on track. But so that was the first question there. If there are plans to reform the compliance. So well, are there plans to reform? There are. But man, you know, if you can see how hard it is to even get what at the end of the day is a fairly benign set of changes in a JORC code across, and how much effort it is to move how many people to actually change words without actual fundamentals. And I'm going to come back to this because I actually don't think all that much is going to change. Some of you guys are getting your knickers in a twist over absolutely nothing, right? The documentation already existed, right? The board of directors already existed. RP, triple E, double E, doesn't matter. It already existed. You had to do what you still have to do to the same degree. We're just making it a bit clearer. Apart from one or two things, and that's where we're going to definitely have a bit of discussion, but there are plans to change that, and that's what the ASMM and the AIG have been working on. I mean, what does the scope look like, and could we go to certification and accreditation, and could we come up with a body that actually looks at that right side of the bow side, or this side, whatever which way you guys are looking at me? That is definitely a good question. So it is happening. We're getting a poll out there, and we're going to come back to this poll. And can you flash it back? Yeah. So I think what I want to do is let's start with the question and see at the end of this how we all look at this differently. So let's just start simple. Do we actually need a code? And another way to look at that, is there actually a problem to solve? Because so many people, you know, that work and stuff, they say, what are we actually doing? Is there a problem, or are we actually bureaucrats doing something for the sake of doing it? That is a good question. So right now, can't tell how many people are sitting in there, but we'll give that a little bit more time as I take another sip of beer.
4 responses.
Okay. So we'll leave that open for a bit, but right now we're sitting on yes, and maybe as that poll is open there, so maybe I'll leave it on the screen, and you know, again, if you can't find the Slido poll, or if you're just sitting there and you're actually hacking away at your resource model and you got me in one ear and half listening, fine. But if you want to participate in the poll, go to the Slido through this code and pop your question in. Nice way to interact, super simple. If you feel that you're too old for this stuff, you can make this work. You can build super complicated resource models, and you can switch your computer on, so you can also do this. So have a look. But let me give you some context, because I've thought about this question a lot, because I think this is where, and I'm keep flapping this piece of paper around, so I'll just get rid of that. But I think the key thing that we need to understand is the problem that we're actually trying to solve. And I put a little paper out on this with Jackie Coombs about 7 years ago, where we actually looked at what it means when it goes wrong, right? Because a problem means that shareholders lose money. And this can get quite complex, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but you know, I guess it's a technical subject, so we sort of have to dive into this a little bit. So if shareholders lose money because of the wrong information coming on the market, you could argue that that's not a good thing. Now, when we put the JORC course together, we talk about the principle of an efficient market. And it is originated by this fella called Farmer in 1970, and there's a paper out on that. So we can put the link in the description at some point, but the essence of this is quite simple. So in order to have a strong market, it needs to be efficient, and there are several levels of efficiency to that, and you can actually prove that an efficient market is a stronger market and is better for everybody. That's the nuts and bolts of it. So, and information is key to having an efficient market. And I'm probably butchering all of this and paraphrasing this incorrectly, so for purists out there, I'm sorry. But that's the nuts and bolts of it. And I thought about this because you can actually think about this in analogies, right? Because the share market, look, I'm just a dumb geologist, so I don't understand all that investment stuff. Some of you are real nerds with all this investment stuff, and I really find it fantastic that you got all this knowledge, but I don't live in that space. But I did buy a car from overseas once, and that actually got me thinking, because I went to a website, and it's called importyourowncar.co.nz. So here's a plug for just a small company somewhere in Auckland. And I was like, well, that's a bit dodgy. They import cars straight off the boat from Japan, right? And you go online to this auction, and you see all these cars with all the ratings, and you click a car, and you put money into an account that you've never seen before, and then hopefully a car will arrive at your doorstep. Well, am I going to part with 10 grand or something like that for a car? Or am I going to take that risk? So there, I said it. Am I going to take that risk? What trust do I have in that market? And so I go and research stuff, as you do, right? Okay, people with good comments, but it still looks pretty dodgy. Right, I did it with a small car, got my car perfectly delivered, on time, absolutely squeaky clean, and the car was in mint condition, as the website said, as the system in Japan with the boats, as they sort of showed on the internet. A few years later, I bought another car with slightly more money and so on, and I did that 3 times now. Absolutely good experience. And it came to me that this is an efficient market. There is trust in that market. If the Japanese say that that car is a 5 out of 5 star rating, it's a 5 out of 5 star rating, and it makes me want to come back. I invest my money into that market. That's the best analogy that I can come up with. And it's a simple one, and I don't think there's an argument that you can throw at that. A good market is an efficient market, is a well-informed market. So if you reverse engineer all of that back, then it's all about the risk that you are prepared to take as an investor. Now, our business is risk, and we talk about risk a lot, but it's not the same for everybody. I don't understand the anarchist amongst us who don't want any regulation or think we're over-regulated. Because the moment you set foot on that regulation pathway, you have to kind of go all the way. You can't go halfway. And that's what this discussion is all about. We said we had a problem because we know what happened in the past, the Briexes, and the Poseidons of the world. And we said, okay, we don't want this. So we got on the road of regulation. And now we're recognizing that, yes, it's complicated. So if you want to capture everything, then you're going to have to keep going because the world around us changes. And the risk perception is for everybody has their own risk perception. But if you want to invest in cowboy land, go to the AIM in London. But if you want to come to the ASX, and I don't work for the ASX, but you want to believe in an efficient market, that's why you're there. So you want to trust when that report is put out that has been written by a competent person and they know what they're talking about, right? All right, so that's the idea here. But we can come back to this issue, but to me, that is a pretty fundamental starting point to do we need the code? So let's come back to that question. We have somebody on the line who wants to throw a question at me live, so I don't know who it is. Okay, well, let's bring Lisa in and see what Lisa's question or comment is. G'day, Lisa. How are you?
Hey, Renee. Thanks very much for calling me out, but I don't quite recall having a comment or question at this point in time. I do 100% agree with your comments around the requirement for regulation, and certainly don't understand why we wouldn't. I think just to elaborate on your point, again, I would take it back to, I would come back to how do investors have confidence in our industry, which already has, in some corners of the world, a very poor reputation. How are they able to have confidence in us if we don't have regulation and a common reporting platform?
Exactly.
How do you successfully compare projects if you don't have a common reporting platform? And as well as I do, I'm part of AusIMM Consultant Society, and as a group we've been actively developing the study processes guideline as well, which is the same thing. It's whilst it's not a code, it's about consistent reporting, confidence, the market to have confidence in what we do. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that absolutely, and thanks for dialing in. It's exactly what I was talking about with the confidence and the trust that you need to have in that market. And once you get on that road, you kind of have to go all the way. And I mean, I do have time for the argument of over-regulation. I mean, we do have to be careful that this doesn't get out of hand, but it's very difficult to see what that looks like, that line in the sand, because for some people it's already gone too far, and for others it's not enough. So personally, do you think there's more to do still here, or are we sort of getting it mostly right?
Yeah, most definitely. Okay. I mean, if some of the work that I do, and probably like yourself as well, is the QP role for the NI 43-101 on the TSX. And I certainly think that that is a great method and requires the inputs of multiple disciplines and competent persons as well. So I'm not saying that we fully go that route, but I certainly, working with both frameworks, have a good appreciation that there's certainly opportunities for JORC and opportunities as well in other areas.
All right. Well, good. Thanks for your comments. Maybe that gives me. Thanks for dialing in. So we'll come back to this, but thanks for letting your comments known. Maybe that got me onto the idea of the NR 43-101 question. Maybe you can find that, Laura, and throw that on the screen. Because we could ask the question for those familiar with the other side of the ditch, as I sort of call it, is that any better? And should we go, quote unquote, full NI 43-101 on this, or are we still thinking that what we are doing is better? And we know the key differences, right? Because an NI 43-101 report is very prescriptive, and we don't like to be prescriptive. The thing that we have as JORCers is that it's up to the competent person. But there are some things that are quite useful, and particularly because everything is in a set structure, you kind of know what to expect. And you do see the full report coming out. So I think we have a question, if you can find it, and we'll put it on, otherwise we'll do it later. Yep, we've got somebody else waiting, so I'll go to that call, but maybe we'll get the question up in a second then, but we'll come back to this topic. I think Alex is in the waiting room. Alex, reveal yourself.
Yes. Hey, how you going?
Hey, man. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, got a new job now, which is great.
That's always good.
Yeah. So my question was around Clause 15. I had a chat with Steve Hunt a few weeks ago regarding it. Actually, you definitely know what my last job was. And the question with Clause 15 is really more of just giving the JORC guys an opportunity to explain it, is that extra layer of financial regulation that's under the JORC committee that Clause 15 brings into it about forecasting financial information in public reports. This is my opinion. I know that you're very good at copying it on the chin. But the thing is that basically after working in financial regulation as a GO, there's a lot there that the guys at ASIC already do, in the sense of the regulatory guides in RG 170 with forward-looking statements. That's where you're going to get most of that commodity analysis, commodity market report. And I totally understand there's a definite requirement for it. It's just something that I feel that's already regulated by the government and also the guys at ASX. And it just, to me, it just adds another layer of regulation that may not be necessary in this instance. During the conversation I had with Steve, though, he did explain it very well, the reasons why it's there. I just wanted to get your opinion and see if it matches Steve's opinion.
Well, if you can actually formulate the question, I'd probably be better able to give you an answer.
So to put it simply, why is Clause 15 there in financial regulation, in the sense of adding another layer of financial regulation where it may not seem like it's necessary?
So is it because, like I said, I don't know all the clauses by heart. So you say Clause 15. I've got Clause 15 here in the original JORC code or in the new JORC code?
The new.
Okay, right. That's
the draft. Yeah.
Sorry. No, that's good. That's because I will look it up. And I might need to come back to that if I'm going to sit here and stare at the paperwork, unless you got a very
Oh, it's right at the back.
specific.
Oh, so
Yeah,
it's just,
right
it's
at
just
the
really
back.
like, to me, the JORC committee is the technical things.
Yeah,
Just to broadly paint the brush like that.
yeah.
Like that. I'm just sort of trying to wrap my head around why the JORC committee would want to poke its foot into financial regulation as geologists. It just seems to me it's something that's out of the realm of the geo.
Yeah, so if we, yeah, so sorry, Lauren, is that on the screen? Is that showing at the moment or? Yeah, okay, so that's clause 15, commodity pricing and economic assumptions. So let's see, commodity price and sales volume expectations used for determination of mineral resources must be based on forward-looking estimates reflecting reasonable and defendable short-term expectations. Is that particularly the one that you're talking about?
That's definitely the one.
Well, it's certainly a topic that you've probably seen me post more about. And I think it is definitely something that partially lies in the realm of the competent person, right? If I, as a resource geologist, get told, as I have been in one instance, use a copper price of 20,000, then I'm probably going to say, I don't think that's quote unquote reasonable.
Yeah.
So, and I think that is a perfectly reasonable place to have. But the way I usually deal with this, said, look, I'm not a commodity price expert, but I do want to be convinced of its reasonableness with reasonable arguments that I can understand as a professional. So if you are working with your niobium deposit and you've analyzed the market and you're telling me, you're giving me the overview and the research that you've done, and there is a price expectation outlook and it's supported by a few papers of people that have done some research on it, if it's a quirky one, that's what I would need. And I feel that I'm not stepping outside my lane there, if that's where you're driving to.
Yeah, that is where I'm driving the question. It's basically, it's just that it's already regulated by the government. Steve gave a different answer, which was, in my opinion, and please don't take offense to this, it was actually better than that one.
Okay.
Steve's answer was basically, it was a very good answer. It was basically for people that are claiming on overseas markets under the JORC code that they're doing things in a JORC compliant manner, you guys can actually strike them off the list as CPs. If they breach it enough times. That was basically the reasoning that Steve gave me, and I think that's actually a really great reason to have that clause.
I think we're talking about different. I think we're sort of talking cross purposes here, because I think both are. I mean, the financial regulations and who can strike who of what record. I mean, not my field, right?
I didn't mean it like that. I meant like you guys can actually. I wouldn't say discredit that person, or you can take some action in the realm of the JORC, as the realm of the JORC committee against that professional for misleading participants and using the JORC code in the incorrect manner. I think that is actually a really great reason to have that clause. I just wanted to hear it, I guess, and sort of get that message out there to people, because I think 3 weeks ago it was raising my blood pressure a little bit, but when I spoke to Steve, I think I was like, wow, that is actually a really good reason to have that clause.
Yeah, look, fair enough, and that's a great answer, and not one that I could have given. I still think that there is room for the other side of the debate on, which is one that I'm, to be quite honest, that's a little niche-y part of the regulations that, is that, to me, that's a non-issue, right? But where I get stuck in quite often on pricing is that you're not qualified to say anything on that pricing. Right? And so I hear you. So good for you to put that out, and I'm sure others will get some learnings out of this, and this is news to me too, so thanks for that. I think on the pricing, now that we're on it, I think a misunderstood point is indeed to what degree we as competent persons are allowed to drive that part of the discussion, and not for the gold price, because that's all pretty clear. But I've done some research on this, and I posted about this before, but it's fascinating to see what people actually use across the globe, because it's the prices people use in Canada are different than the prices we use for the same commodity in Australia, and I find those kind of things fascinating. But that's a completely different thing that you were asking about, fair enough.
And then it's compliment time as well. I love the way the document's structured. It makes it so much easier for the guys that are at ASX now to be able to enforce it, because the way that the document was written previously was very confusing for a bunch of lawyers and accountants that are working at practice in Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth. So that's actually, it's a really great, really well
Excellent
document. So
look, I'll pass it on. Thanks for jumping on. Really appreciate it. Good to see you again, and glad to hear about the new role. Let's catch up soon. But I'll use that actually as Alex drifts off as a compliment to the committee as well, right? Because let's get this one out of the way as well. What we hear often is, you know, all these people on JORC. Who are these people that are filling their own pockets with stuff as well? You know. These people are all volunteers, man. Yeah. They are. I mean, some of these people are spending weeks and months, and in some cases years of their time on this stuff, and they get no thanks for it. And they're not there to fill their own pockets. And anybody suggesting that's where I'll really jump out of my seat, you know, and go for the jugular. I find it deeply offensive. So appreciate a compliment handed out. A lot of people done a lot of hard work, so definitely. Use the opportunity. Thanks, Alex, and catch you around, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, good. What else do we have? I think we've got quite a few folks jumping into the question. Nick, how are you, mate? Why are we introducing ESG to JORC? ESG are important, but in my opinion, nothing to do with JORC. Oh, Nick, never controversial, are you? Aren't you? Look, good question. I mean, it is part of the modifying factors, right? If you don't have reasonable prospects to develop this project because there is an environmental concern, a social concern or otherwise, then arguably that resource or that reserve, and we're going to have to come back to this because this is super contentious at the moment, should not be sitting on your books. We know what happened to Regis Resources last week, right? It's an ESG issue. So that's now leading to the reserve probably being stricken off the record, right? So ESG is important, and I don't think you can unsee that. But if you want to defend that position, Nick, jump on the call. I'd love to talk to you because I think I'd need more information here. Why would you think that has nothing to do with JORC, right? Because then I can also say other things have nothing to do with JORC. It is all part of it. Am I mistaken? Convince me. I'm not convinced. Jackie, I know which Jackie that is. So we're going to 18 upvotes, sorry, for that question. So for all the other 18 people who upvoted that, let me know why you're thinking this. Can we get some more information here? And if more of you want to jump in, if those of you who voted that up, and Nick, if you want to jump in a call here, we can get multiple people here to have a yarn here. So please don't be shy. You've seen a couple of people make the first step, so we can do this. And Jason, let me know if anybody does make that step. Otherwise, I'll just jump to Jackie's question because I think it's pretty clear cut, to be honest. I think it has to be in there. Jackie, code is not the issue, governance is. There is no way to truly peer review a technical approach. Interesting. You know, I agree with the first part wholeheartedly. You know, the code is not the issue. I don't think the code is the issue. You can keep changing the code. Maybe, Lauren, if you can find the image with, you know, these new rules are fundamentally, let's see which one it is. Do you know which one I'm talking about? I need to put my bloody password in there every time. How to get around them, that image, yeah. Just throw that on there. I find this, I've posted this a few times, so you probably go, oh, here he is again. But this to me says so much, this image, this spinning wheel particularly. Here we go. So again, I nicked this. I did a Mike Murphy on this. I just wrote JORC Table 1 on there because at the time, JORC Table 1 was going to solve all the problems. And if you can read at the bottom, these new regulations will fundamentally change the way we get around them. You know, changing the JORC. And I think a few others make that comment on LinkedIn as well. And I'm agreeing with you there. And it might surprise some of you. I think Roland Guthard, who's got a really good post out on some of this stuff that I'm going to try and call out in a minute, has got some good points on this. But effectively, the new JORC code isn't actually going to change how this works. It should, but you know, if I'm just a cynical bastard, which this industry does intend to make a person, then I think you can replace JORC Table 1 with a CV of record or with the new JORC code, and the principle stays the same. So if we go back to the question, yeah, code is not the issue, governance is. There is no way to truly peer review technical approach. When you say approach, Jackie. I might look for some extra commentary. And again, if you want to jump on, please feel free to elaborate, because I know you've got so much to say on this stuff, and deep respect for your opinions here. I think if I'm interpreting it right, when you say truly peer review, I think I know what you mean. And it's hard, right? Because we all have different opinions, and when you get to estimation, Jesus, you know, you can't really prescribe anything, and different people will have a different approach. However, you can separate out the chaff from the wheat, right? There are definitely some things that are just not passable, and I usually go to my favorite example of a resource that was announced about 5-6 years ago, of somebody who did an inverse distance estimate, announced it on the market, and used a power of 0.1. Now, to those of you who don't know what that means, it's not particularly the right way to do it, regardless of your argument, right? So I'm not saying that we need to technically peer review everything, and that creates its own dense network of and morass that will never get out. But we must be able to govern this better. That right side of that bow tie, we must be able to do something better to demonstrate that something is at least passable to some degree or not. I can't believe that would be too difficult. So good question, and it's got a lot of upvotes, but I want to hear more on that, because that's too short for me to really know where you're going with this. So I think again, if you want to come in for a chat, don't be afraid. Have a go. Right, what else have we got? Tony B, why can't CPs be forced to sit a driver's license style ticket, updated every 5 years based on qualifications, field experience, drug knowledge, pass or 75% required? I agree, Tony. This is not difficult. Yeah, we'll pull this one up again. You know, this just doesn't work. We run schools, and even though we're doing a worse job at it every bloody year, if you can pull the other image up of the standards, another one that I quite like, because again, something in Roland's post that I'll come back to, that, no, not that one, the other one, the bottom left, the standards one, yeah, that one. You know, we are dealing with standards that are constantly changing and lowering, and maybe, you know, you turn into that old grumpy bastard that just says it wasn't all as good as it used to be. But, you know, I think we can all safely agree that the standards have been lowered, and you know, I mean, this is obviously nicked again in the stolen image. It says education department, but we're just lowering the standards, and all you're going to get is crap coming through, and that's where we're sitting. So yeah, I do believe, Tony B, that we need a test. This is not difficult, but out come the haters, right? Because who's going to run the test? Because they're going to make a lot of money out of this, and they're all filling their own pockets with all this testing. And why are they doing that? Just to fulfill this, you know, this non-existent thing, that the boogeyman, and so I think you're looking at other disciplines. Man, other disciplines are doing this, right? I mean, you have to sit a test, and it's not that difficult. I mean, even for resource estimation or exploration, you can come up with some pretty damn basic questions just to make sure that people have a reasonable skill level. Not that hard to do. So I completely agree with that. Tony, you got a few upvotes there as well, so that's good. How active is this question here? Have we got some numbers on this, or is that just starting? Have we got some results for the previous questions? Has that changed a little bit, or have we? Oh, okay, here we go. Is it NF43 101 any better? Is that on the screen right now? Is that shown? Yeah, gotcha. Okay, cool. So no, that's good to see. Not qualified to answer. Yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of people might be dialing in from this jurisdiction. Yes, 16%. Interesting. Let's see if we can get a yes person on the phone here. So if you clicked yes here, and you want to present your arguments, then feel free to jump on a call and let me know what you think. Promise will be nice to you. Oh, that's got quite a few questions in there. That's really good. Quite a few people answering. All right, this one. 41 people, is that right? Nice. That's a pretty decent balance. Do you feel that we're really protecting investors better with the new code? No. 56%. Yikes. and not qualified to answer. I mean, I put that in there just to make sure that, hey, if you're just here for the popcorn or to learn, or indeed not a competent person, that you're able to still put your answer in. But that's really interesting. Not so. All right, let's take a question. So we got Tony B, and I think unless Tony B. Yeah, thanks, Jason. Okay. So Lisa, I know you're in the holding room. Unless you want to talk to one of these questions, let me just quickly read the next line here. Anonymous person. How are junior explorers meant to comply with the ESG requirements in Appendix 1 of the guidance? Even junior to mid-tier producers will struggle. Yeah, look, this is actually thrown around a fair bit online as well. The denseness of the ESG is definitely something that has surprised people. So, look, I think that's feedback that I think is certainly being taken on board, and as Lauren is just trying to find the relevant page here to put it on the screen. There is a bit, but as in the original Table 1, what I could say to that is, people were quite, as I remember, quite freaked out about the amount that was required there. But it looks pretty scary, but it really isn't. We're just looking to get commentary on relevant issues, and if it's not relevant, then you should say it's not relevant. But I don't know, I can't answer that question. It's just a requirement that I think once you are talking about ESG, you kind of have to ask all the relevant questions and be quite specific about that. But I can certainly see, and I'm not just saying that, I can certainly see that has a pretty heavy bureaucratic flavor to it and a lot of boxes to fill out. I want to come back to Table 1 on some other issues though. So Lisa, we'll go to Lisa. Maybe she's got a comment to make on some of the things that we just covered.
Hi, Renee.
Hey, welcome back.
I always find the NI 43 question really, really interesting, and I don't know that I directly compare it to JORC. I think the part that I'm interested in is the whole competent person piece and the difference between JORC and NI 43. And that's probably where I'd comment from. At the end of the day, NI 43 is an external reporting instrument. It doesn't replace doing the fundamental work. And same for JORC, the fundamental work is required as well. So it's really about what's being then presented externally.
Yeah, look, and in this case, we need to obviously get technical in terms of NI 43-101 being a legal document and not, in terms of JORC, they're not comparable since it's strict to obviously the CIM guidelines in terms of the reporting on resources and reserves all apply and et cetera. So it's a bit, you're quite right, it's flippant to say that the two could be compared. But I think it's fair enough to say that on general, the reporting regime here and the reporting regime there, what are the pros and cons? And one comment that I think Keith Richards made, and maybe you can put the comment on, Lauren, as we're speaking here, but it is in the folder with the LinkedIn comments. I'm on the fence, but I feel that if we're now going to all this extra detail, why can't we just go all the way and put the full report out, right? The full documentation or whatever you call it. And again, I need to come back to what documentation really means. And we certainly have discussed this around the JORC table in the various working groups, whether we shouldn't just go ahead with that. And to be honest, as consultants, we actually write full technical reports, and that is, quote unquote, the documentation, which was a small d in the previous code and is now a capital D. I don't see any reason why that document couldn't be made public. That is, there's no rule says that you can't do that. And in one or two instances, actually, we've done that. So, yeah. No, good comment, yeah. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, just that NI 43 is a summary document. And I think one of the, some of the curious things is when a client walks in the door and says, I want an NI 43 report for their project. And it's like, well, actually, a study is a lot more than that, and an NI 43 is a summary of that work. So to say that actually an NI 43 is disclosing everything is quite the misnomer. If you think about, for example, on a feasibility study, and NI43 might be 300 pages max, but the actual study is more than 3,000 pages.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, good comment, and I think there's definitely a difference in terms of what we're now talking about as well. The documentation that sits below the public announcement is going to be many more pages with all the variograms and all the CRM plots that you could possibly copy and paste into a report to make everybody happy. No, thanks for that. Okay, now thanks for that. And yeah, thanks for commenting. We'll move on. I think we'll go to the next question, but I do maybe also want to make sure that we can actually touch on the, now that we drifted into this, the CV of record, but before we do so, I'll just see what's on top of the list here. Tony B is out with a new question. How do we fix the current practice of mining cores only using internal CPs? These CPs can often be subject to internal pressures linked to remuneration. Oh yes, that old chestnut. I don't know. How do we fix it? I mean, we need to really state the problem first. I think internal CPs is not something that I think is necessarily an issue. It's perfectly reasonable and acceptable, and as long as the right disclaimers and processes are there, I think that should all be fine. But you're quite right to say that they quite frequently get pressured. And this actually came up in a couple of the consultation events that we organized around competent persons. The one in Perth comes to mind where a couple of people really raised this. And I don't necessarily think that the new JORC code is doing enough to protect a competent person, but there are some subtle changes to make that a little bit clearer in terms of what the responsibility of the company is and what the responsibility of the competent person is. I don't think we are out of the woods in terms of the pressure that they're dealing with. I think is the honest answer that I have at the moment, and I don't really have a way to fix that. I can give you my opinion in terms of the steps one could take, but it really is heavily dependent on your situation and how you're pressured and how you've covered your own butt in your employment agreement in terms of how you structured your clauses around the work that you do as a competent person, right? You have to protect yourself and you have to learn how to protect yourself. And as consultants, we have the same thing with the clauses, that people can't use our name without going through a certain process, and that's important to protect yourself. So yeah, unfortunately I think that we haven't quite solved that problem, to be honest. But good question for sure, and definitely gets the upvotes for all the right reasons. They're streaming in here, so I'll keep going just to make sure we cover ground. Anonymous, how enforceable is the ESG guidance matrix, as signing off on some of this will be problematic? How enforceable is the guidance matrix? Again, I need to read into that a little bit in terms of what you mean by that, dear Anonymous. As signing off on some of this will be problematic. Well, if what you mean by it will be problematic, as in you can't do it because it's compromising your integrity and you feel that you can't do it, I mean, then you just have to make a choice. You either sign off on it or you don't. And if you feel you can't sign off on it because it's just too chaotic and you don't know what's required of you, then it means we have to make the requirements clearer. Why would it be problematic? Maybe I need, again, to know more about what you're saying here. But in terms of the enforceability, well, we have the same problems, right? So you go and sign off on some ESG guidance in your public announcement. You've done everything, you ticked all the boxes, you put text in all the things, and whatever text it is, so you've done your job, you've reported things, but maybe the competence piece isn't quite there. Good luck getting into trouble. The enforceability of that is zero, and that's perhaps what Jackie Coombs' comment was talking about. The governance at that point in time is just not there. Somebody will have to make a complaint, right? And that's just not going to happen. As we well know. So I think it's about that complaint system again. You're really going, and to be honest, I might actually grab this piece of paper and come back to the whole reason why we're going through this change, because this prompted a thought that I had. So again, the question is on ESG, but the reason why we are making the changes, if we feel we have to make the changes, because ASIC has pointed out to us as an industry, as a community, that they're not happy. Now, this caused a lot of frustration, and some of it arguably right, some of it maybe not justified. Who are they to tell us and all the rest of it? But effectively, they've said, we're losing money on this market because of you guys, the competent person. So you get better. Sort it out, be more competent, and or to paraphrase it, don't swim outside your lane. So, I'm just paraphrasing here because this is not to be taken literally. We have identified several instances where the root cause of investor loss has been the competence of the practitioners preparing information with the code. So this is about issues relating to the judgment by the practitioner of their own competence is seldom reported as the basis for sanctions. And that's the important part. The competence of a practitioner is seldom reported as a basis for sanctions. So to come back to your question there, dear Anonymous, the sanctions are zero. We don't have a structure in place and we cannot handle non-compliance with those clauses. And as sad as it is to say it, you rate yourself, you judge yourself whether you're competent, you put it out there, that's all you need to do, right? So I don't know how to answer that question any other way. You have to do your best filling it out, and then if it's not right, you probably won't hear about it. This might lead to further discussion, but let's keep going. We've got our prolific reporter Tony B with another one that gets, or is that already off the list? Right, yes. JORC is not about regulation. ASIC do regulation. JORC is about disclosure. Then it's over to caveat emptor. Oh yes, the caveat emptor one. I might have an idea who this person is. And you're not wrong, man. You're not wrong. It is not about regulation, but it is obviously. I mean, JORC is included in the ASX listing rules, all right? And it does need to be signed off by the finance minister, and this is part of the overall structure. Sorry, but yes, it is about disclosure. But at the moment you invoke a system where we have a competent person. That needs to perform to a certain standard and a certain code, then you have to regulate that, right? So that's the problem. If nobody's regulating that, then who guards the guards is I think really appropriate here. So it is about disclosure, and we all know, right? And I think you've made the point yourself, if I know who I'm talking to here. In one of the posts that you can say whatever you like in there. Your competence there is not to be challenged. It is all about disclosure. So tricky subject. Righto. Let's see who we've got in the chat. Maybe did I want to come in together, or is it on something separate? Or let's bring Matt in to see what Matt has to say. Mr. Matt, how you doing, buddy?
Not too bad. How are you doing, Renee?
Yeah, good to see you, man. Good to see you.
I thought since no one had given some input about the ESG, that I better jump on the line.
Do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the ESG, it's something when there is something material that needs to be disclosed, it should be mentioned when companies are putting out announcements. An example like, in my view, Regis, that wasn't ESG, that was political rather than ESG, which is a problem that we all face these days. But my overarching concern with bringing in things like ESG is, there's a massive spread that the CP has to sign off on. You have to review the tenements, geostats, cut-off grades, all of those things, and just broadening and broadening and broadening. I think it's starting to go beyond the scope of what a person, that you're fundamentally going to have a person signing off with a group of specialists with them. It's beyond what a single person can hope to review with adequate understanding. I've been in gold my whole career, so that's coming 28 years in Western Australia. It's only through my engagement with AMEC that I'm still today finding out things like Section 125A of the WA Mining Act, which can make junior explorers insolvent overnight. And I'd challenge in any JORC meeting, you ask that question, what Section 125A of the WA Mining Act is, 99% will not know. And as we broaden and broaden and broaden to ESG, where there's so many moving targets, like the heritage legislation in WA, let alone in different jurisdictions, you know, CPs can't keep up
No.
with what they need to consider and what specialists they should bring in. And that's my mind as a director. That's the role of the board. It's the board making those decisions and accepting those risks.
That's a good point. And maybe, so I think Alex is on the call here as well, wants to jump in, but as he's coming in, I'll comment on that as well, because, you know, 100%, I mean, this is really where we're sensing that, right? And everybody is sensing that the pressure on the single competent person to know everything about everything is insurmountable. And, you know, we sometimes get stuck. I mean, I can't comment on that because I don't have the experience to talk about the licenses and or socioeconomical issues, and I can rattle off a bunch of examples, and maybe whether political fits in the ESG cap or not is, you know, it's all part of the same thing. I do believe that you have to rely on somebody to justify the validity of the project, if that is a key modifying factor to its success. I can't walk away from that. I think the moment you go there, then you kind of have to go all the way. But it does create these problems, and you know that we've just come up with the specialist category of people who can be relied on. Now, I've got some of my own opinions on that. I think it might not be the entire answer that we're looking for, but that allows the single competent person to at least rely on these people to come in and comment on that. That is, and I do that regularly. If I have to comment on something environmental, I bring in a group, a specialist here, and in New Zealand we have this this game regularly. Or it could be something to do with local regulations, or it could be access, or it could be permitting, and I bring in experts and I let myself be advised by those experts. But yes, I still have to sign off on it, and I don't know how we can walk away from that. But I completely, I mean, that section that you quoted, yes, that's never seen that section before in my life. So, Alex, you got some thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, look, I totally agree with what Matt said there, in the sense that, you know, like if you're looking at it from a CP's point of view, that they might say something like that and think it is a step too far. But the thing is that in support of ESG, firstly, I mean, many of you may have seen the comment there, is that, like, you know, a lot of fundies won't fund you unless there's good ESG disclosure. So that might be in some cases, I'm not saying it's in all cases, that might be a requirement for the individual investors to join that fund. And if the ESG stuff is not done to a sufficient standard, they may pull funding. So that takes food off people's plates, basically. So that's my comment on that. But also, I do totally understand that Matt's comments, they're definitely valid. The other thing is that the way that I read the code was, it's really just what's in the CP's opinion at that stage of the process, that what is the requirement to be disclosed. So as a person, and if you read the competent person's requirements, they have to have 5 years of experience. So 5 years of drilling holes, and you tell me, and then a CP tells me, oh, I don't know what the ESG requirements. That's not an acceptable argument to someone like me, because it's like, if it comes to the point where someone's pulling funding and the CP, that where it's a requirement, they've got 5 years experience, estimation, drilling holes at least, and then they tell me that they don't know what the ESG requirements are, that's not a good enough excuse.
Alex, do you want to just remind people of your background and what you're doing now? Because
yeah, just real quick. Worked around about 5 or so years in mineral exploration. In mineral production with Rio up in the Pilbara. Did some coal drilling, and now I was around about 3 or so years at ASX as the GO there, in the enforcement of the JORC code and Chapter 5 of the listing rules. The way I read it, look, I'm very liberal in my interpretations of the JORC code. I don't like things that are very strict or anything like that. It is on the competent person, and that's the thing. And that was one of my chief arguments in some of the things that I would enforce is like, hey guys, in one sense you claim you got 5 years experience, but then in the other sense, oh, but I don't know how to do this. I mean, like, can anyone justify that argument to me? Because no one has ever been able to do that. So like you can't on one hand say, yeah, I've got X amount of years experience, but then there's some basic things that they don't know how to do.
No, gotcha.
And we've got to keep the industry funded. It's super important. Anyone who's lived through a mineral exploration downturn knows how hard it hits. You don't want to make it any harder. So that's the big issue for me.
No, look, that's good, and I think thanks for that. And Matt, here's your chance, mate. What do you want to say to the ASX man? What?
Former ASX.
No, I know. It's just
I'm not yelling at people on the phone anymore, which is great.
I've only got 10 hours left on my phone battery, Renee.
All right, yeah, that's a good one. But let's tackle it while we're here, right? And I don't know what you can and what you can't say, Alex. And look, I know some of the people there. I know what they're going through, and I'm trying to see both sides of the story there. But here's the rough argument, right? And I see this online all of the time. People are throwing out the baby with the bathwater, or whatever, or people are getting speeding tickets that shouldn't, and vice versa, and it's not clear cut, and some version of that argument, right? And I think, from what I understand it, and it's clearly from a distance, right? Because our clients go through this and they always do the same thing, right? You're advising us, don't do this with the scoping study, but these 5 people have just announced this and this and that, and they got away with it, so should we. That's like the most common argument that we get. So I say, look, you can go and have a go at it and see if you get pinged, but are we... From the ASX, and maybe you have to paraphrase this or otherwise skate around this, Alex, but what is the difficult thing from your end? Because you're not looking for competence issues, right? These are all basically compliance issues that you guys are pinging. It should be black and white, right? Is it that simple? Or
look, if there's a good
explanation. And after that, I want to get Matt's view on this, because I'm sure he's dealt with this and want to see what he wants to say.
True. Yeah. So probably one of the biggest challenges was enforcement of the JORC code, just in general. It was very, very challenging. Sometimes the CPs, like if there is something that we may have seen as a breach, they'll have a completely fine explanation behind it. But there were some other things out there that we'd come up that the guys at ASX would come up with in the certain compliance updates. So if there's any word of advice, check those compliance updates regularly, especially when it comes to Chapter 5. But the biggest thing is basically the issues that I could really only call them issues is the sort of like I'd said before was enforcement. The register of competent persons was difficult as well, because when I had seen something where there was some maths there, dubious mathematics is the way that I'd put it, I couldn't ring up the AusIMM and say, hey, this dude, whatever his name may have been, he's saying some crazy stuff. It's really not appreciated. And I can't name him to the AusIMM because there's no register of competent persons. Yeah. So that's
we're well aware. We're well aware of that one, and that's obviously when we're getting into the CV of record, and I think that's when the gloves will come off in a minute. But maybe go to Matt. Anything on this sort of ASX from because you're a company MD, right? So what are you? What are you seeing? Is this making things even harder for you, or is it just another little compliance step you just have to deal with? How do you see this?
It's going to be a lot more expensive, and my worry is a lot more liability, and I see a big gap in communication and education. When you're starting to put out ASX announcements, to be honest, you go and see what everyone else in the field is doing. And that's, I think, breeding a lot of bad habits, because there's no real guidelines for it. And, I've got calls from the ASX before, and what are those calls about? I left an empty box in the JORC table because I didn't have anything relevant to say in there, and just because I didn't put non-applicable, they wanted to pull the announcement.
Lauren, can you just pull up the pie chart? Yeah.
Another one was because I'd forgotten to put on an actual slide, it was elsewhere in the presentation, the date of an announcement of an intersection. And those things are not anything really misleading that I've put in there. It's purely pointless compliance, I would say. But there's a lack of education, like people guessing about, there's a whisper around the industry that maybe it's 80% inferred, 20% inferred you can get away with in a scoping study, or 10% inferred. Everyone's guessing, and it's only once it gets to the listing officer that you start to get some feedback, and your scoping studies, done at that point. I would like to see a lot more education around it. Potentially, I was the one who put in that initial question about the enforcement side of it.
Right.
By the time the complaints I've put in, someone put it in an in situ value of a resource, and by the time it goes through the compliance process, a couple of weeks, they've already raised money. Or another one was a person's put out a target with high grade results, and get a 70% run in the price, and by the time there's any response from the ASX or the professional association, they've already raised money, raising millions of monies.
Yeah, this is a common argument. I've gone through this one quite a bit before, and you raise a good point. And for that reason, I do believe that, and this is again no discredit to the great professionals and volunteers that work in the complaints and ethics committees, because they actually have a pretty darn difficult job, right? Because it's never clear cut, and it's too late, right? And one thing I can say
people's
about
careers.
ASX, it's that. Well, it's people's careers, exactly right.
Yeah.
So it's extremely difficult, and the ASX has a far sort of shorter response time. I know, generally 24 hours things get dealt with. Where sometimes through the AusMM complaints, it might take months, and then with no certain outcome. So, and then, the damage has been done. So certainly not.
I wonder whether we should have a less ruthless process where, maybe if you're seeing an announcement you think is questionable, that you can send it into the compliance team at AIG or AusIMM. And as a fellow of the AusIMM, I would be happy to look at 5. Maybe the AusIMM sends me 5 announcements a year and say this one's been called into question. Can you give some feedback on it? So we get that peer review that Jackie was talking about, and potentially, if announcements are flagged like that, there should be a caution to the directors before they go and raise money that there's a concern about information that's put out. Before you go and accept people's money, you should think about your cleansing statement and all of the information out in the market yet. And hopefully that could be faster turnaround than I think that was IMM with the hundreds of millions of dollars of profits that they make could drive that sort of process.
We all get a golden watch after our 6 years of directorship. That's from all the membership's money. That's right. But look, your point is well taken. But the thing is, and you probably know this, right? This is one of the reasons I set up OPEX all those years ago, because this was actually a live feedback system of a review around public reports and studies, and that was doing exactly what it was supposed to do, which is highlight the things that were questionable, and they should then be followed up. But even a system like this that would rely on volunteers and so on, that would something needs to happen. And I do think reading panels have been suggested for decades now and never come off the ground. It's I don't know what the solution is. Certainly. But to come back on the ASX pre-screening, and again, I just put this slide on before. I don't know if you can whip it up there briefly, but this is a slide I presented in Sydney. For some of you who know, I do follow these transgressions, if you want to call them, on the market, and I'll probably frustrate Mike Murphy again because it's not perfectly presented in beautiful colors and otherwise, but the message is clear here. These are the kind of things that the ASX has been picking up on, and it's good to know, because then if you have access to this information, you know that you don't want to be part of this list, and there's a list of companies, and some of them are repeat offenders. If you did quickly flash it, if you're on here, doesn't mean it's the end of the world and you don't have to sue me, but these are all just standard speeding tickets for minor thing. Competent person statement missing, on all these issues. Production target, the old chestnut. Visual expiration results, jeepers, that's that one. You guys love them over there at the ASX, those visual expiration results. It drives me nuts. But it's relevant because they're in most instances they're true, but in some instances it's a little bit there's a little bit more to it. So anyway, we can keep spinning our wheels on this one, but appreciate the discussion. Any final comments from either of you, and then I'll just move on to the next subject because I want to talk about
just one quick one.
record.
Just one quick one, Renee, for Matt. The thing with the scoping studies, trying to suspend someone from the ASX perspective for having too high inferred, that's a reasonable grounds requirement. Unfortunately, the people that regulate that are the guys at ASIC. So there is a regulatory issue. If ASX says, hey, fix this or we're suspending you, that's a regulatory issue. ASX is not government. So that's the major thing there. There's a regulatory gap. So that's my opinion on that one. The other thing that I think I put in the chat was also, the enforcement there, and then the visuals. I was the one getting high blood pressure at ASX over that one. So like just to be transparent on that, my head was hitting the roof. And that's where the 5 years thing comes in, and that's where that argument originates. Is from the visuals and people saying, "Oh, we can't do it." I'm like, sorry, that's not good enough. So that's just the quick one on that. So I'm happy to close out the conversation there.
No, good. Appreciate that. And look, thanks again for both of your comments. We'll might come back to you if you've got something else to say and something else,
sure.
but appreciate both of you jumping in there. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
There's lots of activity I can see happening there. And Jason, you were whispering in my ear, but before you whisper, you actually gave me an alcohol-free beer. Did you know that? Or,
It was the only beer we had over here, unfortunately,
What?
Renee.
Who runs this office?
I
Jeez.
don't know. We have Coke, and we've got some sparkling water, which is worse, or I don't know if that's worse. Who knows? There's a Coke sugar-free here.
It's all right. I should be a responsible host. So
We could ask if there's any staff members in the building that are watching to go get you one.
maybe this is the cue. So we'll see who is first down.
Who wants the pay rise? Who's the first one here gets a pay rise.
All right. Anything else that you were whispering? You wanted to say something? Somebody else waiting, or no?
Oh, sorry, no, that was irrelevant now.
Okay. All right. Oh, good. We'll move on then. Now, there's questions there sitting there, and I'm going to have to browse. So one of those 8 upvotes where a company director is allowed to be a CP. In my observation, the majority of dodgy releases are by directors acting as CPs. Okay, we'll cover that. I think I want to just go to the CV of record as a topic, and I don't know if we've got questions on that. But that is definitely one that I wanted to lift out. Well, here we go. What exactly is included in the CV of record? It isn't really spelled out yet. Well, that's not the hardest you can throw at us, dear Anonymous. There is a few things to say on it. Maybe you can pull up Roland's comment, because again, I don't know if you're listening, and if you're not, all good, buddy, but I did enjoy this little write-up, and it's in true Roland style for those of you what I mean by that. And there's some useful comments in there, and I just flipped this. It is only part of a post. Go and find it. There's things at the back end that I'm not quite sure I align with in terms of the things like documentation and so on. But when it comes to the CV of record, he points some really good things out. And I'm going to paraphrase it, but the argument is, okay, who's going to host this thing, right? And if you start hosting it, it means you need to control it. And if you need to control it, you need to find administrators. Who's bringing the beer? Oh, hey, yeah. Oh, here we go. Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it. Oh, it's hot down here, So the argument really is that needs to be administrated. That's going to cost money, there's all sorts of issues with confidentiality of privacy of information and all sorts of other things. And have we really thought that through? Now, so I've been part of the discussion to get it there, and I've provided my own reservation into that space. But I do have time for the argument of, hey, look, we got to do something. And it really comes out of the pressure from ASIC ultimately that says some of your people are swimming outside their lane. And the argument really was, okay, we need something that at least that makes it harder for people to swim outside their lane. So putting up a CV of record was something that the team had thought about. I agree with much of what Roland is saying, and for those of you who are interested, I'll post a link to his post either later or now, or if you can do it, because I think it's in a Word document, so if you can post it in, or you can do it, Roland, if you're listening, or anyone else, if you can find it. Because it's a real, so, you know, there's nothing he's holding back, and then there's definitely a few good arguments why that would be difficult. I have difficulties with it because you know how it goes, right? There's certain things always developing, and my CV tomorrow is not my CV in 3 months' time. I do a whole bunch of different things. I'm in seabed minerals, I'm in base metals, I'm in gold, and you know, I've been doing rare earths, but at what point do I write this up? And then you get to a place where you need to announce, oh shit, I forgot to update my CV in the last 6 months, you know? I mean, it's not that simple, and I fear that, you know, to pull the same image out again, this new rule will fundamentally change how we work around it. It's going to create a whole bunch of bureaucracy again to ultimately really make no difference to anything. And I'm worried about that. So is it more about, are we seen to be doing something? I want to know what you think about this. And I know this is a hot topic because we can see from the online responses and comments on LinkedIn posts and so on that this is dear to people's hearts. So if anybody wants to jump in, and maybe somebody new wants to come in and talk about this, but yeah, I'm not certain that is going to make a huge difference, or that it's not going to create some issues. I mean, who's going to host it? Is it JORC? Well, if JORC is going to host it, then JORC needs to become, you know, a company, and there's a reasonable argument. Now, I think we're getting into a space, and you can already sense it, that JORC will have to become a company at some point in time. You know, this regulation space, the checking of things, the governance of things, the screening of things, the competence accreditation things, something is I think over years pushing us into a space where this will come to us one way or the other. So maybe this administrative requirement is actually going to force our hands into this space. So yeah, I think it's going to be quite difficult. Have you got some questions on this particular, or comments of people? Because there's so much happening here that have you been able to filter anything on the issue of
I'm working on it.
working on it? Okay. Well then, look, I've broached the subject now, so if you feel strongly about it, then please just you know, put a comment in or dial into the meeting here. And I'll go to the top question maybe for now. That's a new one, isn't it? Is there a need for a CP and a specialist when it appears the qualification requirements are similar? We can just have reliance on more than one CP. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So originally, I think, and I might recall this incorrectly, that the specialist did not have to be a member of a specialist organization. And I think that was what I understood what was my intent originally with it anyway. I'll give you an example, what I thought would be what we wanted here. I just signed off on a niobium resource in a carbonadite system, and you know, I'm a regional geologist, and but am I a niobium expert? No. Am I a carbonatite expert? No. Am I a regular expert? Well, I've done a few regular things. So I feel I need some extra firepower there. So I've relied on an absolute true carbonatite specialist, right? But I don't know if he is a member of an organization, and neither do I care. The guy's a specialist, and I'm taking responsibility for that specialty. And I feel at that point, that's enough. So I agree with that question. If the intent is to point out that it's almost the same, then why would you call out another title? I agree completely. A specialist to me is somebody indeed, hey, permits in New Zealand, right? Okay, there is something with the permits, or permits in a country like Zimbabwe, where we've recently done some work, and you can have multiple permits overlapping each other because the permit system is a little bit opaque. I can't tell whether those permits are real, so I need to rely on somebody. Another example, I did a seabed nodule resource in 2012 or 11 or somewhere there. And I'm not a seabed nodule expert. You know, you can go and sue me, or you can complain against me all you like, but you know, I do understand the depositional environments reasonably well, but I certainly am no expert. And certainly I've never sucked shit up the ocean floor before, right? So I went to a dredging specialist in Holland, which was a very old professor who was not a member of anything, you know, but he was a specialist, and he told me over many meetings how to suck stuff off the ocean floor and what the economics and the pitfalls and so on there. Enough for me to know as a competent person, reasonable, right? Yes, we can do this. This is not pie in the sky. To me, that's what a specialist is, and I don't need them to be. I don't need them to be part of a specialist society. But again, this is my personal view, not that of JORC, right? Good. Good question. I really enjoyed that question. Thank you. I see you're browsing around, Lauren. What else have you got for me? Have we got some...
Sorry, I'm just launching some more polls.
Oh, okay. Launching some more polls. Well, can we go... How are some of the other questions doing of the polls? Because we got... that one is done quite
Did we
well.
finish this one?
So NF43, any better? We're sticking with no, so there's some more people now, 53, so that's a clear no, so that's good. Do we think that we need a new code? The top one, go back to that again? Yeah, okay. Yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, because that might be changing. We need a new code. Well, it's 91%, so or we need a code. Is there a problem to solve? So that's clear. Good. What else? 74 on that one. Do you feel that we're really protecting investors better with the new code? Okay, so definitely you've got some more yeses there, so that's good to see. 76 people, so people piling in there. It's on the even, so I think we're really not seeing a very clear answer out of that, but James is commenting, specialist, go down, that's a specialist of new grades, the same as an expert. Yes, it is, yeah, good point, James, fair enough.
Yeah, there's been some good comments. And
oh, Jesus, there's a
lot
lot coming on.
track.
Thanks for the interaction. This is really all I was hoping this would do, a good conversation, and this will also be a great record for us to learn from, so I really appreciate all your
There was a
comments.
good
And if
comment.
I'm not getting to them, then you need to upvote these comments a little bit more. So let's go to some of the questions, Lauren, and then how are we doing for time? So it's 5:30 New Zealand time here. So look, for those of you who are still here, and most of you are actually here, which is really, really cool. Thanks for that. I'll go for another half an hour. And we got 30 on YouTube. Exciting. Hello, YouTubers. That's almost getting us to 200. Really good. Okay, so let's go through some more questions, but we'll try and go for another half an hour. So if you have something burning that's on your mind, jump in there, and happy to talk to you. That's working really well, so jump on the phone, don't be afraid. Dave, interested to know if anyone here has ever identified a non-compliant ASX announcement, and did they lodge a complaint or contact the CP directly to discuss? I cannot comment on this, Dave. Because I would be in breach of various codes and things. I think we've all done this, to be honest, or a lot of people in this call. I have a lot of discussions with them, and I think part of the maybe to go all the way back to the start, the reason I got into this kind of JORC space is not to become a JORC person or a JORC expert, but you gravitate all these news bits, you know, to you, and that really expands your vision quite well. The only thing that I ever wanted to achieve is to understand the framework of reference, because if I know what good reports look like and bad reports, or good estimates or bad estimates, and whatever else you want to replace for that, then I can do my work a lot better. That was always the intent. So I like discussing non-compliance with people, and yes, I see a lot of it. I get sent a lot of non-compliance because people don't have enough time to submit something, and I don't want to go through the system, so they send me an email, hey Renee, have you seen this? Do you want to submit a complaint? And then, you know, quite often Lauren draws the short straw and does all the hard work. But yes, we do then submit complaints, but also don't want to make it sound to all the people on the call that, you know, a judge and executioner here, you know, I'm not interested in wasting or spending my time on this to try and semi-police anything. It really is. Sometimes people cross the line, and I think, okay, something needs to be done here. But I think quite a few people are submitting, but I know more people who have gone frustrated with submitting, and they will never submit again, and that's a worry. So I think it's becoming less and less. So good question. So Dave N, we can tick that question, Lauren, and we'll go to the next one. Why do you think Australia lacks a mandatory national regulatory framework for geoscientists similar to Canada's PGEO designation? Should we push for this? I think we should, and we are pushing for that, although pushing is probably the wrong verb. If you're familiar with the competent person discussion that's happening at the moment, and some of it is on record, you can go to AusMem or JORC websites and find this discussion. We had 2 sessions, one in Brisbane, one in Perth, and there's been plenty of discussion on this. There is a push to go to something like accreditation and certification, although those things mean different things, and nothing has been decided. And again, this is speaking as me, not as an AusMem director or as a JORC person or otherwise. It is clear that we need something to fill that void. And when we ran a poll, it is, and I'm paraphrasing here, so apologies if I get the numbers wrong here, but I think a fairly full room of professionals voted in favor of something like that, 80% to 20%, right? So yes, that is definitely happening. Good question. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Let's go to the next question here. If you scroll to the tab. Oh, a heckler. Did I see a heckler? God, that's got to be good. Can you scroll down? Hecksher, sorry. Sorry, person, to getting the name wrong. I actually thought I'd read heckler, so they could be interesting. But let's go through the top and look at the next question there. I've read a lot of NI 43-101 reports and written a couple. In some ways, they are more opaque than Table 1. A complete Table 1 would be more transparent than NI 43-101. Would be, should be. Yeah, I think so. If indeed people do what they're supposed to do, and maybe you want to quickly slide in the Table 1 paper on the screen. I agree. The Table 1, maybe just cover the Table 1 thing, right? So a lot of people said, man, this is a lot, but what it's really doing, it's streamlining it with the Crisco format, which is obviously governing these other codes as well. So we're just aligning here. And I know from Table 1, and I wrote a little paper on this 8 years ago, so if you want to go and find this on our website, I think it still holds true today on a lot of topics. But the point that I really made in this paper is, it doesn't matter what you say in the fields, as long as you say stuff, then you filled the box, and the only way people can come to you then is on the competence part, and nobody ever does that. Everybody always complains about some compliance issue, the speeding tickets, right? But nobody ever complains on you mixing up accuracy and precision, as I usually use as an example. So you just need to answer the bloody question. And what you can see from all those Table 1s is that on a lot of technical points, people don't actually know how to answer the technical question. And I made that point in quite a few dozen examples in this paper. Thanks, Lauren. Back to the question. So yeah, I think if indeed, and this is the big if you understand what's asked of you in Table 1, and if you fill everything out correctly, then it is a very strong document. But you do have to do that, right? You can also write a good public announcement, and then technically you don't even need a Table 1, right? This is interesting, a little gap somewhere in the old code, right? Because it's a checklist. And as long in your public announcement you say everything that you should say in a Table 1, then you don't need to also put a Table 1 in there. But I bet you that if you put an announcement out without a Table 1, you get pinged by the ASX because there's no Table 1, or some other part of somebody else will complain about it. So the whole Table 1 thing, I think I've always been mystified by it, but I'm drifting here. But your question is right. I do believe it would be less opaque than NI 43-101. Although, one thing I quite like about NI 43-101, if I want to understand the controls of mineralization, there is a section on that, and that's the same section in every report. And in a JORC report, I have to go and hunt for it. And as a resource geologist, that's the first thing I go and look for. Do you understand the controls of mineralization? So there are pros and cons to each. How's this poll going? Do you think, is this on screen? Yeah, boom, thumbs up. Do you think the simple 5 years relevant experience rule is enough? We've got 15 people jumping in there, but let's leave that question sitting there. If you don't mind jumping into that and providing your answer. Do you think 5 years is working? Let's maybe see that changing as I have a sip of my alcoholic beverage. All right, so I think 20 people sort of sitting at 2/3 versus a third, which is probably where it will stay. So not enough. And I think if we know that, and we have known that, and here I might give a small wink to Jackie Coombs' PhD thesis as well, that made that pretty clear. And again, a point that Rowan Gothard in his post makes as well is it's not enough. But sometimes it is enough. I think the 5 years thing is abused, it is misused, misunderstood, oversimplified, and it's not fulfilling its purpose. To be quite frank, and I'll say this, hi, I'm Renee. I put my first resource out after 3.5 years experience, and everybody would go, oh my God, is this true? But I worked 364 days every year for the first 3.5 years, so I figured that I had enough experience to meet the 5 years experience, and I did a lot of homework to make sure that I knew what was going on, and I got a lot of people to peer review the work and so on. But again, as some people make the argument, there are some managers with 40 years experience that have been putting samples in back for 40 years and don't know certain things that people with 5 years experience know. I think it's a really bad structure to 5 years, so I'm with the majority on this one, but I know that I'm swimming against the tide when I look at this question. But maybe we'll go to the next question, and this the CV of record. Yeah, let's see how that one is going. For all the competent persons out there, so here goes, your chance to jump in. With respect to the CV of record, are you ambivalent, or you don't care, or you go along with it and won't change anything but hope for the best? You're not qualified to answer, or you're happy. This will help weed out the bad actors swimming outside their lanes, or fight to the death. Never a CV of record. What is your preference? 18 people. We'll give that some breathing time. We've got plenty of people to comment on this, so we'll please go on to that particular question and let us know what you think, because this is definitely going to be a tricky one. If we've got some comments on that in LinkedIn, I can see. Oh, Mark, yes, we're still going, mate. Where were you? Did you actually leave? Come and find you, mate. It's not okay. But we are still going, and we have been talking about CV of record and about the years of experience. And maybe can you run the question as well on the 1052, which is the yes, that one. Maybe throw that one on as well. So here's a question as well as you, and we're probably sort of all running them at the same time at the moment here, but this is a key question. If the 5 years doesn't work for you, and it seems that the majority feels that way, should we then go to a different system? And here's a proposed system, and this is particularly for the resource estimation side of things. So if you feel that you're not qualified to answer, then see if this tickles your fancy more. So at least 10 years mining industry experience, including at least 5 years resource estimation experience, at least 15 resource estimates across at least 2 commodities, and at least 5 reconciliation studies that allow them to examine their own resource estimates. So let's see where that gives us. We'll let that stew in the background for a bit. We'll go back to a question. Oh, I think we've got Alex in the waiting room. Alex, what's on your mind, mate? Because I've got a lot to chew through still. So
yeah, sure. I'll try and be quick. Complaints at ASX, they have to be super careful on how they respond to those.
Okay.
So that comes down to a regulatory issue as well. 5 years experience, I agree. It's dubious, but it's a good level playing field with the 5 years. But it does depend on what that level of experience is. So if you've just been drilling holes in iron ore pisolites for 5 years, I don't think that qualifies you to make public announcements in relation to a gold estimation. So I think 5 years experience of estimation, just be more specific on that, is a good middle ground, I guess. But I'm just thinking off the top of my head on that one. The last one was, and also the CV of record to get your CP status. I think it is a great idea. If you have a look at information sheet 111 from ASIC, regulatory required 111 from ASIC, content of expert reports. You guys are experts, 100%. You should have a CV of record lawyers have to have it, accountants have to have it. They have to do special
point.
requirements to get, say, to become a CPA, or even to just represent someone in court. A lawyer's got to get their practicing certificate, and then to go out on their own, they've got to get more of that and more CPD stuff. One of the things that used to piss me off as a geo was mining engineers ripping on me about being a geologist. It fucking drives me nuts. It drives you guys nuts. Have the profession more respectable. You'll stop getting yelled at mine sites by dickhead mining engineers.
Oh, wow. No, that's it.
No, they're not dickheads.
that's
I've got a lot of good mates who are mining engineers.
No,
I've got a lot
I
of
know
good
what you're
mates who are
saying.
mining engineers,
I know
great
what
at
you're saying.
spreadsheets, but anything else. That's sort of,
Yeah. No, long live the geos. Well, let's stick on that. Appreciate your comments, Alex.
Yeah, cheers.
Let's go
That'll
back
be my
to
last one as well. Cheers.
No, I'll appreciate it. Really appreciate your thoughts. I mean, it doesn't. I wasn't expecting somebody with ASX experience to join the call, right? Which is really good because not a lot of us knows what goes on, but it goes on behind those closed doors. So all good. Really much.
Unfortunately, I do. That's why the wrinkles are here.
No, all good. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thanks, buddy. Okay, so let's go back to the question. So here we got 39 already on the competence. Not in favor of that system. So that's interesting. That's too restrictive, I guess, for a lot of people. So that's very, very interesting, because this is one of the things that was mentioned in Jackie Coombs' thesis on the study of the JORC code. And I'm probably paraphrasing all of this incorrectly, but good to see. And this question here, with respect to CV of record, are you ambivalent, don't care, go along with it? That seems to be a bit of a winner. Happy this will weed out. So, but by and large, people say, yeah, let's go with that. Not anybody that says fight to the death. Very interesting. So that's not what I expected. So that's good to see, and a good cross section as well. 40 people. So very nice. Let's go to some questions, and we're running for another 20 minutes, I think, unless people are jumping through the door. What are all those hands, Jason? Talk to me, man.
Sorry, I was just saying we're at 1 hour 45. Just so
right. Yeah. No, I got it. I'm looking at the clock here, so all good. Thank you. How does one decarbonize a mine? I don't know. Does anybody know that? Does the ASAMEM and the JORC committee recommend JORC code over other codes, especially with more and more resource nationalism? Crikey, that's a tricky one. Do the ASAMEM and the JORC committee recommend JORC code over other codes, especially with more and more resource? I don't quite understand the addition there, but I think, one thing I can say, we're still, as much as we can poo-poo on it all day long, I still think it's a pretty damn decent document. I mean, the amount of work that's gone in here with so many people, the hundreds of people that have contributed to this, right? I still think that it is the better codes out there, and I would rather have the emphasis lie with a competent person and then deal with whatever comes your way than have all this prescriptive bullshit that some of the other jurisdictions have to deal with, right? Because and I will never forget it, I did get a phone call for a job that I did on an NR43 101. And one of the OSC regulators rang me up saying that I hadn't submitted enough duplicates in my soil sampling program, and that really blew my mind. And I thought, that's not what we want. So no, I think we're all pretty happy with that outcome. Let's go to another question. Although, let me quickly see what other topics I had, because we were talking about new JORC code, and there's obviously a bunch of changes so let's just maybe run through those actual changes so that, and I just need to find the right piece of paper here so that at least we have a little bit of a run through that. And then if key questions filter to the top, we'll just grab those. So let's at least cover some sort of, you're here to actually understand some of the proposed changes. We'll work through the PDF here. There we go. So I'm not going to go in detail, but I'm just going to give you the 5-minute overview, and then I will put my personal view on it. So, and again, personal view only. What I have here, structure and format, competence and responsibility, reasonable prospects, ESG, risks and reconciliation. Those are the key areas of change. in a very brief format, structure and format, it's now aligned with Crisco, and as Alex just said, it reads a lot better. We've got numbers in front, and we have split out the guidance, hallelujah, from the actual regulatory stuff. That allows us to make changes to the guidance every year without having to go through that legal bullshit which is difficult to push a new piece of legislation through. That's a real benefit. I think structure and format, happy with that. I don't think we see a lot of people complaining about this. Competence and responsibility. We talked about the CV of record. Good intention. As Alex has said, lawyers need it too. There are some good things about that, but there are some unknowns along waiting for us on the road. But in essence, other than the CV of record, which is a pretty benign change, nothing much is changing there. There's a couple of subtle changes to experience and how that's phrased, Oxford commas and hyphens and that sort of stuff. But there is really not much change other than the CV of record and the specialist. As I already said, the specialist, if they already have to be a member of a reputable organization, you're pretty similar to a competent person. Nothing much will change there. Reasonable prospect, you already had to do this. It's the same stuff. We've deleted an E, boo-hoo, right? And that's the eventual, only because reasonable already carried eventual in it, and some people were taking that a little bit too far, and it's also aligning us with some other international code. It doesn't change anything. You still have to comment on all the reasonable things as you had before, right? Nothing is changing there. So look, argue with me, right? This is why we're here. Modifying factors. So, you're needing to look at modifying factors. And one thing that I see people misunderstanding, and maybe just to clear this out, the only thing with resources now is, and people have made the comments here, I've been screening through the questions here, and on LinkedIn as well. And there is a comment, maybe Lauren, you can find it in the LinkedIn comments folder. There is somebody that's making a comment about resources needing to be just resources, and they don't need all that bullshit of modifying factors, and I want to comment on that. Let's see which one it is. Yeah, this one. Now, I don't know, Ian, maybe put that on the screen. Ian McCulloch, Managing Director at Kumuru Exploration something. I'll just read it out. This is 2 days old. On the subject of resources, my long-standing view is that this definition should be restricted to the mathematics and the geology. A resource is a statement of fact with a defined cutoff grade, adjustable to give a grade that may be varied as a consequence. A resource definition is independent of all factors that may affect a reserve definition. The quality of the resource ranking is a direct result of the information input, nothing else. This means that a resource definition is timeless, whereas a reserve definition is time-dependent. The influence of price, metallurgy, sovereign risk, etc. 2 upvotes. So this is not what it is at the moment, and it is a real contentious issue to some at least. I don't agree with this statement, just to put it out there. I think if investors give you money the moment you put an inferred resource out there, right? That's your first statement. Hey, this is what we have, and we can now start. When you get to an indicated resource, we can start scoping. There's money, there's production targets, there's everything else that can happen. Resources are there to tell you something about the viability of the project, and on that basis, investors invest. So it is reasonable to have some expectation of the future. And this is it. This is about variance, right? If you have a DFS, your variance of all of those important bits is this, right? If it's a pre-FS, your variance of all those factors, you know most of them, but you're not really 100% sure, and so on. And as you drop down that list, you have less confidence in it. You have higher error bars. So if I put a resource out there, I don't need to spend 2 weeks studying the metallurgy of this deposit for, God knows, $500,000 and run all these tests. But at least I have to have some understanding of whether this shit is refractory or not, right? And that's reasonable, right? I feel very strongly about it. That's reasonable, but it doesn't mean that you're now an engineer. And then I have to pretend to be an engineer. And I've had heated debates and arguments about this, right? It's logical. You just have to have a reasonable test for all the various subjects, and that includes ESG. And that includes the prices and the commodity prices and so on. So I don't think that is reasonable. So that is, that modifying factors, we've made that clearer in the code, and it is now clearer what is expected of people. And just to get this one out once and for all, because this keeps coming back, just because you have a lower understanding of those modifying factors, and you think, it might not come out of the ground, let's just call it inferred. that pathway is not available for you. It doesn't matter. The old code says this and the new code says it. Doesn't matter what your classification of resource is. If you don't have reasonable prospect, it cannot be a resource, period. So some clarity on that. Risks. Now, risk is new. If you control F risks in the old JORC code, you will get 2 hits and there's nothing to do with risk in there. So risk, opportunities, strengths and weaknesses and so on is a completely new addition. And if you're a good, competent person, you were already doing that in your reports, right? Because you have to be transparent about the risks, and already you're kind of building that into your table 1, but we're now calling it out. You have to call out the risks on some of these projects and be transparent about them. And again, some posts on LinkedIn about this that are calling this one out, and there's some good comments in that I won't have time to go into. And then finally, reconciliation. If you can find Scott Dunham's a little LinkedIn thing, Lauren, there's another one in there that's Scott posted, which talks to this, and it was another good comment. So this isn't a comment on Henry's comment there on reconciliation, and so he says, I agree. The section on reconciliation, one of the aspects of this that concerns me the most. So Scott's concerned. Well, see if he's got some good arguments here. While it seems simple enough to compare estimate to performance, there are deep complexities that always exist. I worry that the less aware reader of a public report will be misinformed by the reported reconciliation. For example, 100% does not necessarily mean the estimate was entirely correct, nor does reconciliation of 75% mean the estimate was incorrect. The level of investigation required to understand the reported performance can be huge. I'd go so far to say that if I was asked what sort of geology mining specialization people should pursue for their careers, it would be a reconciliation. So more on this in another post. So look, I know Scott knows a lot about this particular space. He does a lot of work in reconciliation. I sometimes dabble in it too. And 100%, right? Reconciliation is never what it seems, right? You say 99%, right? Show me the data, right? It is such a complex space, and it's indeed one of the most fun places to work in, because that's where it all comes together, and it's a fantastic place to work. And now we're bringing that into the code. Jesus, on our heads it will be, right? So, but again, I think we're misreading that a little bit. We're not looking for a 15-page in-depth review of reconciliation. What we're looking at, previous resource versus the new resource, and if it's 40% different, can you tell us why that is? You know, what assumptions have you made? Or if you have mined the previous resource and it was 20% out, have you brought that now into the new resource or not? It's just that sort of basic stuff. We don't have to go to DEFCON 5 straight away and bring all the complexities about this stuff in. They're fair comments, but I don't think that's really what we're looking for. We're just looking for, hey, if you've got some previous knowledge on mining and reconciliation, how have you considered it, and has it steered you in any way to make your decisions, right? That's a pretty basic sort of baseline for all of this. So the point is this, and I think sort of 7 minutes to 6 here, to me, and I'll go out on a limb here and I'll get in trouble for saying this, I don't think anything really changes. It doesn't. I mean, the CV of record, boo-hoo, right? You can have my CV. I don't care. I don't live in that conspiracy theory world. If you want to have my details, Facebook, fuck it. Have them. I don't care. There's nothing you can learn from me whatever. So I have my CV in the data breach, and they know that my hobbies are basketball and chess, whatever. I really couldn't care less. So when it really comes down to it, nothing changes. It's just more clarity, better guidance. And so let's not all get our knickers in a twist on this. Let's just keep our minds open and use the code as it's intended. But yes, will it change fundamentally how projects fail or not? No, because we'll go back to the original image. This will change how people fundamentally work around these new regulations. So I think that's really the summary for me. Do we get out of that? How do we get out of this? We can, but we have to make some bold steps. And as much as this is an improvement of readability and clarity, these are not the bold steps that we need to really get the fuck off this planet and evolve, right? This is not how we get there. More work needs to be done. But that's not to discredit the insane amount of work that's gone into this, because this is truly an exceptional piece of work with far more clarity and structure than we had before. So look, I think that's almost like a closure statement, I feel, but I think we've got time for a few more minutes to see if there are any bangers sitting in here that we've missed. Let's see what we have in the final minutes here. Bruce, hey Bruce, no land access, no exploration pathway disclosed. Yep, agree with that. Anonymous, what's to stop a geo using a grade control drilling to cook the back reconciliation of a dodgy resource? Oh God, did grade control drilling, you mean blast holes? Yep, there is no rule, but if people are up to no good, then we don't have a protection mechanism in place there, so yeah, for sure. What can be done to minimize headlines stating world-class outstanding when this is clearly not the case? Nothing. This is indeed a pet peeve of all of us, and I actually have a post on that. We actually did a review on the adjective misuse, and I've got statistics on this, and there are so many misuses of that, but if you want to police that, if you want to start policing English as well, then I think all bets are off. So let's not do that. Shouldn't we first work on getting companies to comply with 2012 and Velmin before it's further complicated 2024? Yeah, sure, but I think we've said what we needed to say on this. We'd love to. Yes, that was sort of my closing statement. We've got a lot more to do on actual compliance, and this isn't necessarily going to change that. So good comments there. Let's do the top one. Does JORC 24 solve the problem of substandard reporting or just make it more difficult for those with integrity to do right under the current system? Yep, that it doesn't solve the problem. It just makes it slightly more difficult. But if ignorance is really, you're not protected here against ignorance. If people still don't read the code, this is why every person related with the JORC courses and the JORC code in any conversation will start with the same sentence: read the code, right? You can't have a conversation if you don't read the damn thing. And even on LinkedIn, I saw a couple of conversations, people said, oh, the board of directors, finally. Man, it was already in the code. Read the code, then start commenting. So, good comments. ChatGPT has more than 5 years cumulative experience now. It has been a handy specialist. Yes, I talked about this on the podcast a few times already. It's coming to us, and it's not going to be pretty, but I don't think that will happen. I mean, the MDs just want to wordsmith and mold this so desperately that they'll keep ChatGPT out of this for a few years to come. So. Look, so I think those are, have we got some more love from the polls? I think we got some final final numbers here. Of having no rules at all is worse than having some rules. Is there a universe where enough is enough? So yes, say most people, having no rules are worse than is there a universe where enough is enough. So we do need to find a line in the sand where we don't have to go. Are we going to go through this again in 10 years' time? Geez, I don't know if I've got the energy for that, to be honest. Right. Okay. Look, I think we've got what I wanted out of this. I find it very interesting to see the questions and the discussions. Thanks for coming online to paste your questions. I've still got lots of people sitting here. Appreciate you sticking with it for 2 hours to listen to JORC stuff. Thanks to the team. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Jason. This will go on to YouTube as well for those who want to find out more. But thanks so much, and see you next time. Cheers.